Hi guys, it's James from Team Calamity here, and today I've got a deck profile for you for Mono Water Fusoya. First of all, apologies, I haven't got my tripod with me, so I am filming this by hand. So apologies for any shakiness that you may see. Before I show you the deck, first of all I wanted to shout out to Jonathan Ho and Alex Hancocks, as I used both their builds to actually create this. So yeah, big shout out to them, both very talented players. You'll see a lot of inspiration from their deck in this one. So without further ado, let's go ahead. So first things first is free Layla. It's an absolute staple in the deck. The advantage that it gives you from reviving this guy here is absolutely crazy. The fact that he draws when he both enters the board and also when he leaves is absolute madness. She also allows you to develop a board state. Yeah, instant free of, absolutely fantastic. So next card, free Viking. Has to be done. I wouldn't play any less than this. Even without Layla, you can play it onto board, and you just don't care if it dies. It's it's absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, it is a little bit weak to kind of board clears and things like that. So you have to be a little bit careful. But it doesn't really matter too much if it dies. You're still going to get the draw. Notable mention: if it is even removed from play or Shantottoed, you still get the draw because it's when it leaves the field, not when it goes to the break zone. So it's worth mentioning on that. Okay, next is free Lena. Now, apologies for mismatched foils here. I don't have the full deck in foil. It is what it is. Lena's fantastic because it allows you to build that field again. There is numerous targets in here, one which you'll see on the top there, but I'll speak about that in a second. You can also use her special to revive a Layla, which then picks up a Viking, gives you 3 forwards in one go. Other than that, you're just putting her into board to either revive Knight or Ephemeral Summoner, which we'll get to in a second. Absolutely fantastic at free. I will always keep it free. Free Knight. An argument can be made to only play 2 of them, but it's fantastic. When you've got Waka on board and 5 backups, it's a 2-drop 9,000. It's absolutely fantastic. It's just a big card for little investment, and the fact that it can be revived by Lena, what more could you want? Okay, next, 2 Ephemeral Summoner. Used to play 3, and I overdrew them. 2, I believe, is the right number because you can revive them via Lena, or you can just cast them on their own. Its main purpose is to interact with the Fusoya. If you do not have Fusoya on board, you can always put a piece of removal summon on the top. It makes your opponent really apprehensive about attacking, because if they do attack, they are going to lose something on board. So it can stall them for a turn if you need more time to set up. So kind of use it defensively, use it offensively. It's just a good card overall. Next card, free Cloud of Darkness. The deck's kind of main removal. You need to take advantage of the fact that you've got a big board. Cloud of Darkness is the way to do it. You're generally dropping it when you've got 3 forwards already on board. So when you play that as the 4th, it counts as the 4th. And lowers something's power by 8,000, generally killing it. Its swing is nice as well because it loses 1,000 power for each forward you control. It generally won't kill something. However, it will make it weak enough to either not want to, the opponent doesn't want to block with it, or you can then Fusoya it. So it's quite handy to do that as well. It also was really handy on Friday night when I last used this deck, because it turned off an Illua's protection ability, which then allowed me to kill the Illua. So that was very handy to have. Always play free. Water needs that removal, otherwise it's going to get a little bit behind. Next, 2 Steiner. An argument could be made to only play 1. I preferred 2 just because I want to see it consistently, and if you do draw the 1 early and you have to discard it, then it doesn't feel great. Generally, I won't play it if I'm not on the free damage. But an argument can be made if the opponent opens super aggressively and you need to play it, then so be it. It's really handy because if you've got lots of small minions on board and you can't do anything with them, drop this guy. You're able to take advantage of the fact that they can't really do anything, but this guy can swing on through. Opponent generally won't block it, and it makes their removal really awkward because you can tap your forwards in response. to make him bigger to kind of, you know, avoid that removal. Really solid card, absolutely love it. Next is free Cagnasso. Generally, its main use is either to stall, to stop your opponent from attacking through, because you can just block this guy and just block numerous things. You can reduce an opponent's forward, so you can put it in within Fusoya range, which is great to get around things like Minwu. But you can also do a board wipe with Cagnasso and either Scholar, which we'll get to in a second, or Leviathan, because you simply just play it, reduce their forward by a couple of thousand, and then Scholar or Leviathan it, back to your hand, replay it, reduce their board again, and that'll generally wipe a lot of stuff out of the way. Fantastic card, does a lot of tricks. Yeah, absolutely loved it at free, wouldn't reduce it. Then we come to our Opus 7 edition, which is 2 Halicarnassus. So I'll read what it does for you. So when Halicarnassus enters the field, all forwards opponent controls lose their abilities until end of turn. It also has tap and discard 2 summons, choose one forward and break it. That last part's not too relevant. It's the first part that you care about. This deck has a real problem with a few cards. First of all being Dadaluma. If your opponent drops a Dadaluma into one of your established boards, there is no real clean answer to get rid of it without losing a couple of your forwards. It's also Ishtola Legendary. That's a problem to get rid of. Zidane Legendary as well, because it can't be targeted by abilities. Ilua. There's just a lot of different things that you would struggle to get rid of. This answers all of it. So if you've got Fusoya on board, just simply summon it. It resolves. You can then Fusoya and Ishtola. You can Fusoya a Zidane. You can just remove anything. It's really nice as well. A combo that I did was I played this when my opponent had a couple of Vikings on board. And then I followed up with Cagnasso, which wiped their side of the board, and they got none of the draws from Viking. Absolutely fantastic. I doubt there's been many situations where I'd use its second ability. It's quite expensive, and generally you want to use the summons for other things. I guess if you're getting flooded with summons, it's an option, but yeah, I've not used it yet. Cool. So that is the forwards. There's 24 in total. So I'll move on to the summons next. Just move them there. So, free Leviathan. Was only playing 2 to begin with. This is where kind of I've took inspiration from Alex Hancock's here and gone to 3. The main reason is there's a lot of annoying things that you can bounce for your opponent. It's fantastic off the EX burst, as well as that it combos with your stuff to bounce them. So if your opponent is trying to hit your board with removal and you've got an on-entry effect like Layla, things like that, you can do this on your own cards. Or if your opponent drops a legendary Zidane, it's like, do you know what, I'm going to put you back a turn. As well as that, if your opponent drops a really sticky forward like Vanille, you can, just bounce it back to your hand. Lots and lots of uses for it. Very versatile card. Absolutely loved it at free, no problems at all. When you hit it off the EX, it puts your opponent so far behind, it's fantastic. Okay, next. Move that other way. Is free Famfret. Absolutely silly card. You have to be kind of careful when you're in a mono water mirror. It's not so useful when your opponents have got Vikings and things like that. But when your opponent has got nice beefy forwards, especially against Earth Wind, where they've got legendary Zidane, they've got Dadaluma, they've got Calamity, anything like that, you're more than happy to kind of trade your small guys like Viking and Ephemeral Summoner and whatnot for one of their big ones. If the opponent hits it on an empty board, you're just laughing because you can just trigger and remove their forward for free. Doesn't target because you're actually, the player is selecting, and it gets round things that stop it from breaking. So if your opponent tightens, it doesn't really matter because it's not breaking it, it's just putting it in the break zone. One of the best summons in the game. Absolutely love it, it's great. Up. Free Choo Choo Lane, also nicknamed Choo Choo Train. I wasn't in love with this card to begin with, but it's kind of a necessary evil. The fact that you can put it on top of your deck with Ephemeral Summoner means that if the Fusoya damage is not enough to kill a forward, then you can finish it off with this on the EX burst, and you get to draw as well. It's nice off the EX because you just get to draw regardless. And also it gives you a combat trick. So if you don't have the Fusoya on board and your opponent is sitting there and trying to make your life difficult, you can attack. When they block, yep, choo-choo lane, your forward wins, theirs doesn't, and you get to draw as well. So it's a really good combat trick, and it also goes well with the Ephemeral Summoner and Fusoya. Yeah, it's fantastic at 3. It doesn't feel great when you draw it early, but I wouldn't play any less than 3. And the last card, just 1 copy of Moogle. Mainly because if you dead draw those Fusoyas, you need to be able to discard them. Also, if you haven't seen the Fusoyas, it gives you an answer to kind of dig for them. You can stack this to the top with Ephemeral Summoner and then use your Fusoya, and you get to draw 2 and discard 1. So it's quite handy, allows you to dig through your deck. I wouldn't play more than 1. It's absolutely fine, it does the trick. Cool, so that is all summons, there's 10 of them, which brings us on to our last thing, which is backups. So the first thing, free Yuna. Shout out to the Yuna Young team while I'm here, why not? So, free Yuna, one of the best water backups in the game. Reduce all your water summons by 1. So, your Famfrit goes to a 2-drop, your Leviathan goes to a 2-drop, so you're just having to discard a card from hand to activate it. Your Choo-Choo Lane goes to a 3-drop, so it's a little bit cheaper. Absolutely great. You want to see this in your opening hand generally, just because it makes your Famfrit and your Leviathans much more potent. Absolutely fantastic. Get the promo versions, they look really nice. Just a single Artemisian for when you get those really bricky hands and you need to dig for more cards. Generally, if you're mulliganing and you see this card, you generally don't have to fret because you're going to be able to put all the bad cards back on the bottom. If you've got a handful of summons and you don't want them because you want to stack them with Ephemeral Summoner, put them on the bottom. If you've drawn too many Fusoya, put them on the bottom. You need to draw into Fusoya. It's great. It does everything. 1 I generally find is enough. Some people prefer 2. 1's fine. I see it enough to kind of not worry about needing a second one. Now, probably the other second best water backup in the game, Scholar. There's so many uses for this card. The utility is absolutely crazy. Bouncing back your own forwards like Layla, to reuse them, things like Lena, also to stop your opponent's removal, the fact if they're going for a board wipe or they're trying to remove your card, if you're just like literally want to block an attack, say like you got a Layla on board, you can go block the attack, in response Scholar, put the Layla back to your hand so you can revive a Viking and draw, and the attack is blocked as well. It was really handy against the Mono Lightning matchup because I had one of these open on board and waited for my opponent to Alcid. And I literally just went, yep, Scholar, return that forward back to my hand. And yeah, the Alcid fizzled. So absolutely great card. Always play 3 of them. There's just so many cards you can abuse with it just by returning them to your hand. And the fact that you can do it in your opponent's turn is absolutely nutty. It just means at no point can your opponent ever do anything to your guys because you can just bounce it back to your hand. This is Gladiator. Quite a good card. The fact you only have to pay 1 water and break him just to revive a standard unit of cost 3 or less is great. Generally my target is Viking with it. So you get to crack that, bring a Viking in, draw. When the Viking dies, you get to draw another one. Quite a useful thing is if you're playing against an opponent who's using White Mage as one of their wind backups. Sorry guys, my phone just decided to play up then. Yeah, so if your opponent's got White Mage and they are threatening, they're leaving it open to try and remove one of your Vikings, when you play the Layla and target the Viking, if they crack the White Mage to try and remove your Viking, you can tap the Gladiator, revive it in response. It does cost you your backup, but they've already cracked theirs, but it means your Viking hits the board and you still get the draw, and it means you'll be able to use that for future as well. Quite useful for Knight as well, bearing in mind obviously because you are cracking a backup, the Knight's going to come in with 1,000 less power, so just bear that in mind when you do it. But yeah, it's absolutely great. I generally, like I say, revive it, revive Vikings with it, get a draw, and you can block with it, or you can pump Steiner with it, whatever you want to do. It's quite useful to have. I don't think there's anything else I'd play instead over it. Okay, 2 Waka. It's just good to have big forwards, really. So the Steiner becomes 9,000 power, so does the Cloud of Darkness. Your Vikings go to 3,000, so it puts them out of some AoE stuff like Illua. A lot of AoE stuff is 3,000, so it also puts your Layla out of the range of it as well. It boosts Knight as well, so once you've got full backups, instead of 8,000 it becomes 9,000, which is quite a big forward for a 2-drop. It's just good. It's good overall to have. Big forwards win games. 2 of them is fine. I have seen other people play 3, but I think the 3-drop backup slot is big enough that you don't want to be playing 3. Yeah, I'm happy with 2. Next, 2 Bron. The reason why I've gone for 2 Bron is just because of how important it is to get your Viking engine up and running. When I originally only played 1 of this card, I struggled to see my Vikings. I'd draw my Laylas, but I'd see none of my Vikings. Nice thing about this is Knight is also a target for it. So if you've seen plenty of Vikings, you can just grab a Knight with it instead. And it's an EX burst as well, so it's nice to hit off the damage. Or with Fusoya, it's just free advantage. I wouldn't ever play less than 2 of them. It's just been extremely handy and just makes the deck super consistent. Happy with that. And then, lastly, the whole purpose of the deck, Fusoya. Absolutely nutty card. Who would have thought that dealing yourself a point of damage would result in so much advantage? The fact that you can stack things with the top of your deck with the Ephemeral Summoner, the fact that this can be used during either player's turn, it's absolutely crazy. You generally want to be playing 3 because you want to see them as early as possible, and your opponent generally knows how useful it is, so they'll try their hardest to remove it with either Hecaton Chair or Archer, etc. You generally want to have the 3. I believe that's everything. Hopefully I've covered everything. So shout out to Team Calamity. Hope you've enjoyed the deck profile. If you've got any questions whatsoever, just pop them in the comments and I'll try and answer them as quick as I can. Give the deck a go. It's absolutely fantastic. It went undefeated during the tournament on Friday. So yeah, cheers guys, and please subscribe. See you later.